My name is Tracy Brown. I'm the Regional Director of Water Protection for Save the Sound, and I want to thank you for spending some of your lunch hour with us today to talk about beach water quality and the Long Island Sound Beach Report, which we just released last week. The Long Island Sound Beach Report looks at beach water quality, which is specifically fecal indicating bacteria. So this is measuring what are the fecal bacteria levels in coastal waters where people are swimming. This is the protocol that's used all across the country for making beach opening and beach closing decisions. It's exposure to fecal bacteria in the waterway as a swimmer that is going to make you sick. That could give you swimmer's ear, pink eye, a GI infection. Those are your typical illnesses from swimming in water that's contaminated with fecal bacteria. So that's what the report covers. That data is available at all of the sound beaches that are monitored and are, official swimming beaches. So there are 204 beaches on the sound that are monitored for fecal bacteria. That is the data we're going to be sharing with you. It is collected by departments of health in each of the communities. So we also do fecal bacteria monitoring at Save the Sound to try and identify specific pollution sources, especially when it relates to failing sewage infrastructure, and make repairs. But for this report, we're actually using publicly available beach monitoring data from all the beaches around the Sound. And the seasons that we focus on in this report are the last 3 seasons, 2018, 19, and 2020. So we do have a website where we publish these data as soon as they're available, all year round. So I encourage everybody to check out the soundhealthexplorer.org to look at the beach grades. I'm going to go there live later on in the presentation and just show you what's there and how to navigate the site. That website actually has over a decade worth of beach data. We started the site in 2014. And so we have all the monitoring data from that time going forward. We also have rain data because that's very closely linked to beach health and predicting beach health at some beaches. And just this past year, we updated it to include more information about beach access, amenities at different beaches, and to provide links. So if people want to see what's available, most recent data, it links out to the different departments of health. I will say that there is no such thing as real-time beach water quality monitoring. So, and the beach quality monitoring only happens once a week. So that is, there's a common misperception that when beaches are opened or closed, it's because someone's going like they can with a pool and put a dipstick in and take some water and decide if it's clean. But in marine waters, that's not the case. In marine waters, they are monitored once a week, and it takes 24 hours for that result to come back from the lab. So usually beaches are managed based on kind of the patterns of pollution and how it relates to rainwater over time. And that's what this tool lets us look at. It's not real time, but if there is a failing grade that is a surprise at any beach, then it is closed, but it's closed the day after. So it's always a little bit of a risk of exposure. If, for example, there's a sewer leak near a beach. And that's why we have the sewage right to know laws, which can give real-time notification if we do know there are sewer leaks anywhere near our beaches. So that's why we need that law to protect the public, because this is not a real-time science, not at this time. So when we assign the grades, we look at 4 different aspects of the beach health that make up the grade. So it's a combination of 2 frequency grades and 2 magnitude grades. So the frequency grades are, we're giving a grade for a whole season, a whole swimming season. So how many times in that swimming season did the water quality at that beach fail to meet the state criteria? And New York and Connecticut state have the same criteria. As you can see on this slide, it's a cutoff point not to exceed 104 colony forming units in 100 milliliters of water for the Enterococcus fecal indicating bacteria that's measured. So if it's below 104, it passes. If it's above 104, it fails. There are more sophisticated beach management and monitoring criteria that have been approved and released by the EPA. They're almost 10 years old now, but Connecticut and New York State have not adopted them. Happy to talk more about that if people are interested when we get to questions. But for now, we want to be consistent with what the states are doing. So we use their criteria. So whenever it goes over 104, you get a failure for frequency. And then we assign those by wet weather and dry weather because we're trying to look at which beaches are really triggered every time it rains to have poor water quality, because that's the best way people can protect themselves and avoid those beaches after rain, and which ones maybe are having failures that aren't related to wet weather, which means there's some kind of a local source that's providing ongoing pollution, and we're interested in investigating that. So those are our frequency grades, but we do also look at magnitude for this report. And when we talk about magnitude, we're saying it's the concentration of the fecal indicating bacteria. So if you swim in a waterway that has 105 score, your risk of getting sick is very different than if you swim in a beach that is 2005 score. So it's similar to what we've learned with the coronavirus, that the concentration of exposure to pathogens increases the likelihood of getting ill. So we wanted to make sure that that was also captured in the grade, because we found in the first few years we did this, we had some small beaches that didn't monitor a lot and they might have little failures and they got bad grades. And then we'd have other beaches that would monitor maybe the same amount or more frequently. If they monitored more frequently and they had more failures, they could get a better grade or a similar grade. But if they really were getting these big spikes in fecal bacteria, we wanted to reflect that, because that is a red flag for swimmers. So that's the combination: frequency of wet and dry failure, and then how extreme are those failures when they do happen in wet weather or dry weather. And then we also have a gray. So we really believe that all the beaches should be monitored at a minimum once a week. That is what the federal government requires for public swimming beaches. So if there's beaches that monitor less frequently than once a week, we give them an NA, we give them a gray grade, because that's just not acceptable. You could just monitor on a few sunny days and get a bunch of great scores. You could kind of, cook the books with that type of selective monitoring. So we really just focus on the beaches that are monitoring weekly. The other ones are there, but with grayed out grades. And generally, the minimum season is July 4th to the end of August, and that is 9 weeks. So we look for a minimum of 9 samples. Also, if there's a beach where they're not ever sampling when it rains, we don't give them a wet weather grade. So that's where you see the frequency of wet and magnitude wet grade out here. Because again, beach managers know if they skip the wet days, they can get artificially better grades, so that we don't feel that that type of monitoring is a fair comparison to put in a study like this. But most beaches, especially where the Department of Health is directly doing the monitoring, they're on a schedule. They hit different beaches every week, and they just repeat that schedule throughout the summer. So, generally by far most of the beaches do the random sampling that you're supposed to do. Okay, so I want to talk about wet and dry weather just a little bit before we get into the specific grades. So these are some of the overall trends that we look at. We have divided the beaches into regions because there are so many. We're so rich in beaches on the Sound. It's too many to do on one map or one chart. So we divided into some logical regions: 2 in Connecticut, 3 on Long Island rather. And then we have the Western Sound, where we've combined Westchester and New York City. So overall, you can see that when it rains, the failure rates at the beaches doubles across the board. And what we're showing you here in terms of the two charts, the one on the left is from the first beach report that we released in 2019. So that was 3 years, 16, 17, 18. And then the one on the right is what we just released. And obviously we're just starting this recreational season, so we don't have 2021 grades yet because they're just beginning to gather them. So we wanted to see if there was changes in the weather impacts. And this tells us if there's problems in the infrastructure, if there's problems with stormwater that's getting polluted and delivering it to the coastline. There could be problems with sewage infrastructure that's failing public pipes or septic systems. So we want to kind of track different weather impacts across different regions in the Sound. And what we saw, this is early days, this is only our second version of this report, but we did see with this last 3-season batch of data that in Suffolk County, they're having increased pollution events when it rains. So that's something of concern. We know they have a lot of septic systems there that need upgrades. And there's some beaches with stormwater problems. So we've been talking to the Department of Health in Suffolk County, and we'll continue to do that and track this. The other regions didn't really move to a measurable, significantly measurable degree, a little bit of increased wet weather problems in Nassau County as well, a little bit of a decline in Westchester, New York City, which is great news. And a little bit of a decline in Eastern Connecticut. But generally, I would say, one other thing to mention on this slide is you will see the difference between wet weather and dry weather is very extreme in communities like New York City and Westchester, where you have combined sewage overflow systems. We also have some of those in Connecticut. So those are places where you can see, much better, like we're seeing better than average in these Connecticut communities, and even Westchester, New York City, amazingly, in the dry weather, but then a really big jump in the wet weather. So we also, just trying to keep an eye on what's happening out there and, to inform our advocacy work. We also look at these regions over time. So these charts show those 5 regions, and this is very top level because it's all the grades for a lot of beaches together in one place. And as you'll see when I show you the grades, there's a huge amount of variability location by location, but we keep these trends just to see if there's something we need to be really concerned about. So in the last report, we are starting to see some problems out in Western Suffolk and Eastern Suffolk. And like I said, we've been having some conversations and doing some investigation around that. It looks like there was a little improvement last year, but we also, again, we're looking at the weather too, to see were there any drops or major bumps in weather. So this is something our scientists and our science advisors analyze every time we do the reports. Okay, now for the fun part, the grades. So I encourage everyone to go to savethesound.org, and you can download a copy of the report and really look at these in detail. I've got 5 pages of grades, so it's going to be a little bit too much to take it all in right now, but I'm sure people who have a favorite beach will quickly be able to zero in on their beach. Just to give you an overview, what we see on the map is a color for each of the beaches, which is the grade just for the 2020 season. So these are the most recent seasonal grades. And then you can take that number down and look at the beach here, and you can see what that grade was, plus the prior years. So, just using your kind of quick visual brain, it's pretty easy, I think, to look at the colors in any location and start to see, are we having improvements? Are we having declines? Are we consistently doing well? You've got this nice big stretch of green beaches here. You've got some, bumping around with Hammonasset Beach. You can just go across the line and start to look at the performance. One of the things that is really important to remember about beaches. If you look here as an example, what's happening in New London, where you have a D beach next to very close proximity to 3 A beaches. This is pretty typical. I mean, you also see it. We only have 4 D beaches in this report card for 2020, which is great news. But we have quite a few C's, and you can see they're really mixed in very close with the A's and B's. And what that tells us is the pollution at our beaches comes from that immediate coastal community. This is not like a big wave of pollution where you see, you know, big swaths of failing grades and then swaths of passing grades. This is hyperlocal pollution. If you have fecal bacteria getting in the water from sewage infrastructure or from wildlife or from livestock and farming, it's going to get diluted out into the sound over time, and it's also going to get disinfected with exposure to the sun. So, you know, it gets there locally, you're swimming in it if you show up on a day when it's not that clean, and then it kind of moves out. It doesn't usually kind of go that directly to your neighbor, unless, of course, you have a big sewer spill or you have a combined sewer overflow that's pumping a lot of wastewater out, in which case it can spread to neighbors. But usually these are smaller localized sources of pollution. So here's another one of our D's here at Anchor Beach, number 1, which is right next to Anchor Beach number 2, which got an A+. So you've got a D and an A+ right next to each other. So this tells you there's something very specific and local at Anchor Beach 1 that should be able to be tracked down and addressed, so they can both be A+ beaches. I'll mention over here for our Fairfield County Greenwich folks, Greenwich didn't submit. Usually they're very good. You can see we have historic grades. They're good at submitting their grades, but with the coronavirus, they didn't get their grades up into the EPA database yet in time to make it to this report. And we also did not get grades for Pleasure Beach because Pleasure Beach was not officially open due to the coronavirus, or if it was, the data has not been provided for whatever amount of monitoring they did in 2020. Similar here, we had some beaches that normally are monitored that were either closed or did not get their monitoring done. So they are grayed out for this year, but you can see historic grades and you can see we expect they'll come back. This is interesting. If you'll remember from the chart that I showed earlier, we had a spike in wet weather. In 2019, it was much rainier than 2018. So this really shows you that these beaches, not surprisingly, they are in the Eastchester Bay and they are near just downstream of some combined sewage overflows, sewage outfalls, part of the New York City sewage system that when it rains, they really crash. So the wet weather grades, both frequency and magnitude, this shows like big spikes in fecal bacteria levels when it rains, and especially in this rainy season. 2018, less rainy, and they did a better job managing that. Now, I meant to head into Nassau County first. Oh, you know what? I'm afraid I might not have the Nassau County image in here. Okay. Apologies to Nassau County. I'll show it on the website. Okay, so heading into Suffolk County, you can see what our concern has been in 2018. You start to really see a difference between these charts from what we saw in Connecticut. And not all the problems are in wet weather. There also are some dry weather problems here as well. And then as we go east, it gets a little better, but still, you know, not as good as I'm sure Nassau County and these beachgoers would like it to be. And then Fisher's Island beaches we have in here, but they do not monitor weekly. They just monitor a few times in the season. So we do not give them grades, but we want to acknowledge that they're there and that they're not monitoring. Okay, so people love the best and worst list. So we do a best list of beaches on the Sound each time we do this report. We only rank public beaches. You know, one of the goals of the report is to inform people about the great places they can swim and get in on the Sound. And if we're promoting a lot of private beach clubs that people can't get to. That's not very inspiring or actionable. So we take the public beaches and based on beaches that have the best grades, and when we have ties for grades, because we do have quite a few A pluses, then we look at that magnitude grade. So which ones are passing all the time, and then if they have some entro counts that are passed but below 104, you know, if your one beach is getting a lot of 10s and the other one's getting a lot of 90s, you know, the ones with the really low entro levels are on this list. And I put Connecticut at the top because, you know, it's worth noting that if we did one top 10 list for all the beaches on Long Island Sound, it would be 8 or 9 Connecticut beaches and 1 or 2 New York State beaches. So we definitely see, as you could tell with the visuals, that the water quality in the Connecticut beaches tends to be better. But we wanted to make sure New Yorkers also had some beaches they could focus on. So we did the two beaches, 2 lists. And this year, actually, we were excited to, for a second time, have Orchard Beach in the Bronx be on the list. They actually have gotten 8 A grades in a row. So we released the report at a press conference at Orchard Beach. This is the only public beach on the Sound in New York City. So for the 8 million residents of New York City, if they want to swim on Long Island Sound without traveling far from home, this is their one option. And it's a very beautiful and historic beach with a beautiful pavilion and a beautiful view of the Sound. So we just wanted to highlight that for them. You can see the video of the press conference on our Facebook page if you're interested. We had some Bronx residents join us. All right, so now I'm going to go on to just kind of a quick overview of what we can do. I know everyone who lives in a coastal community or likes to go to local beaches wants an A+ beach. So what are some steps that communities with the non-A grades can work on? And I will share that this report card had a lot of A's. I believe we had 58% of the beaches getting an A, 79%, I believe, got an A or B. We had 5% that didn't get a grade for the non-monitoring or too low of a frequency, and then 16% that have room for improvement. So 16% got the C's and the 4 D's. And those are our top beaches as Save the Sound in our mission to clean up waterways. So these are the actions that we're highlighting. The first one, you know, stormwater is rain that doesn't absorb into the ground, but that picks up garbage from the ground and keeps moving and takes it somewhere else. So if you have a problem with contaminated stormwater getting to your beach, you can put in green infrastructure technologies like rain gardens and bioswales to try and capture and clean that water before it gets to the coast. That is an area that Save the Sound has a whole team that does this work, and it's one of our primary offerings. So if there's anybody on the line from a community that believes they're having a stormwater problem or could use some infrastructure to clean up their stormwater, let us know about that. We'd love to talk to you. Sewage discharges. So if you have sewer lines that are leaking or that have often breaks and those are polluting the waterway, those will account for some of the high magnitude failures. Usually you need something large like a sewage discharge to get a high magnitude failure. So that's something that we work on with our legal actions and our advocacy work. The sewage right to know laws are incredibly important for making people aware of where the sewage infrastructure is failing and getting investments there in time. So we really encourage people to sign up for sewage right to know notifications in their communities and let us know. We have a whole watchdog program to encourage people if they see a sewage overflow to let us know so we can follow up and talk to local authorities and make sure that they get addressed. So this is bread and butter everyday work because, you know, pipes age and it's a part of our infrastructure that's invisible and is often neglected. So one of our call out actions is focusing on this combined sewer overflows because they have such a massive impact. There are only 4 big cities on the Sound that still have combined sewer overflows, New York City and 4 of the older cities in in Connecticut. So New Haven, Bridgeport, and Norwalk. specifically, but we want to get rid of those altogether. Another wastewater topic, septic systems. Septic systems that are not properly maintained can contaminate groundwater that can get to coastal waters. If you're close enough to the water, then, you know, overflowing leaching fields and a rain event could contaminate rainwater and get to your coastal waters. There are great new technologies that are available that have recently been developed to replace old septic technology. We encourage everyone to get those in the ground, especially on Long Island, where there are over 300,000 septic systems. And this is a big problem. This is probably one of the issues that's driving pollution on the North Shore in Suffolk. So that's super important to upgrade your septic systems. There's grant programs to help people pay for that. At a minimum, a lot of people don't realize that septic systems have to be maintained. You actually have to have them inspected and pumped and cleaned out at a minimum once every 5 years. So if you have a septic system at your home or a cesspool, please be sure to do that maintenance, because it can pollute your beaches and you don't want to end up swimming in that stuff. Then animal waste. So fecal bacteria from animals can make you sick just like from humans. There's nothing special in that regard in terms of a lot of the kind of gastrointestinal illnesses and other infections you can get. So don't walk your dogs on the beach. If you do, be sure to clean up after them. Try and keep animal waste off of the streets and out of your stormwater catch basins, because when it rains, that's just going to flush out to a river, which will lead it eventually to the coastline, if not to a pipe that goes right to the coast. And there's lots of strategies that beach managers can use to keep geese off the beach. Too much geese poop can also make you sick. So there's dogs that can be hired to get rid of them. There's oiling eggs. There's raking beaches if there is goose poop on the beach before people come. So all of that needs to be managed. And then finally on this list, climate change. So, you know, our beaches are becoming more and more critical for people to find ways to cool off as we're going to be heading into, you know, ever warmer summers. Save the Sound with this report made a real call for communities that have very restrictive access to town beaches to try and make those more equitable and make it affordable for communities where people aren't lucky enough to live right on the shore, but, you know, have children and really need to also cool off and get outside. Coming out of the coronavirus, you know, we all have this increased awareness of how important for our physical and mental health time in nature is. So we really encourage our communities to consider their neighbors and open up this amazing resource to as many people as we reasonably can on any hot summer day. So with that, I'm going to open, I'm going to take us on to the Sound Health Explorer website. But while I open it up, maybe Martin, are there any questions in the chat?
I was going to say, before you do that, if you want to take a few quick questions.
Yeah.
So I answered a few of them, but Josh had asked if C or D, is C or D an unsafe beach for swimming? I responded that, you know, C's and D's mean that there are instances when the beaches are unsafe, and looking at the data for each particular beach will inform you on whether it's safer during wet or dry weather. And if it shows failing during wet weather, then you should probably avoid the beach for a day or two after any rain event. If you'd like to add anything to that.
Yeah, so I'm drilling into one of these D beaches here just to get to your safety question. That is a great question. And Martin's answer is correct. And what we have on the website here is actual day by day what each of the samples was when it was collected and what the results were. And then we have the rain cloud so you can see if it was raining and how much. And we have a cut point for what we call a rainy day of 1/4 inch or less, but some of these beaches do get contaminated at very low levels. Like right here, it was just a tiny bit of rain and it actually triggered a spike in contamination. So I think, you know, I mean, generally the beaches were all very thoughtfully situated. You know, they don't put beaches in places that are going to be unsafe to swim. I mean, there are criteria that these beaches have to meet and continue to meet for the states to keep them open. So I would never say the beaches are unsafe for swimming. But for the beaches that get poor grades, most of them, as you saw in that chart with the wet weather failures, it's because when it rains, they're getting polluted. A rain event is becoming a pollution event. And that's what we don't want as communities. And that's why we have those different strategies I was going over to address that. But sometimes you also see failures in dry weather, so what's happening here? And these are things that beach managers really need to look at, because if you're managing a beach based on your wet weather model, which most of them are managed. So most of the beaches, they'll say either, we know this beach doesn't fail in wet weather, so we're gonna, once it stops raining, we're gonna open it up again. Or we know this beach often fails in wet weather, so at 1/2 inch, we're gonna close it for 3 hours. At 3/4 of an inch, we're going to close it for the rest of the day. They have cut points like that. 2-inch storm, we're going to close it for 48 hours. Those decisions are made on a beach by beach basis by the Department of Health, looking at data like this. But when it's dry weather and you're getting a bad grade, those are the beaches that I'm most concerned about, because they're not finding out that the water quality was bad until the next day. And if it wasn't raining, your beach wasn't closed. So this is where you could potentially be exposed to something that could make you sick. Now, just to give it perspective, that doesn't mean if you swim in the water when it has a 208 level of enterococcus that you're definitely going to get sick. Not at all. The people who most often get sick from swimming with exposure to fecal bacteria are children, because children are getting it in their mouths, they're getting it in their eyes and ears, they're more inclined to stay in for a really long time. So the degree of exposure that you have to the fecal bacteria and the pathogens, the disease-causing microbes that could be in that fecal bacteria, depends on if you're ingesting the water. You're not going to get sick if you go in and there's some pollution and you don't open your mouth or put your head in at all, unless you get stuff under your nails and then maybe you're putting those in your mouth or eating a sandwich without washing your hands. So it's not a definite you're going to get sick, but it is a red flag. It is unacceptable and Save the Sounds view that there are beaches that have fecal matter, that are making them fail state criteria, especially during dry weather. That's kind of a long answer, but
a good one.
Okay. For me, so I swim in the open water a lot, and I have swum in all kinds of conditions. And for me personally, I feel that the mental health and physical health benefits of just being in the water outweighs the risk most of the time. So, it's a highly personal question as well, but certainly if you live near a beach that's got a green on this map and it's consistently good, I would choose that over a yellow or an orange next door for sure.
So another quick question from Carol. She lives on the Niantic River, and she realizes that testing isn't listed here since there's no public beach. However, shell fishing is sometimes closed on the river. And are the closings connected to the beach testing near us?
Yeah, so for the shellfish testing, that is also fecal bacteria. That's also what they're looking at to keep the shellfish healthy, because again, we don't want to ingest that. So getting it in your shellfish is just another way you can get sick from fecal bacteria, just like, getting in your mouth when you swim. The shellfish criteria is much more stringent. So if you have shellfishing beds that are open, you can, that water quality is definitely safe to swim in. If you have shellfishing beds that close, it could still meet the swimming criteria because it is more stringent. So I wouldn't say that is necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fail the swim criteria. You'd really have to know how big the failure is. But I would say generally, as a rule of thumb, if waters, and we have a whole section in here on that as well, but I'll turn those layers on. We actually show in this tool where there is shellfishing. So I would say in general, if there is shellfish that is allowed in a waterway, then it's generally a well-performing waterway. If there's kind of chronic sewage pollution problems, they wouldn't even let the shellfish, they wouldn't get beyond restricted, conditional restricted.
Right. And then one last question from Bruce. Are the failing wet weather grades in New York City from 2019 associated with CSOs only, as you mentioned, or are there other sources of wet weather pollution that impact water quality?
Yeah, so let me show you where the CSOs are. So this site, you all have to come back and kind of poke around. It has the answers to all your questions, or so we hope. So right here, the default view is the beach grades, but we also show where all the combined sewer overflows are, those brown dots. So the combined sewage overflows are only in these 4 areas. And if you sign up, and Connecticut has we just successfully in this legislative session got an improvement to public notification from Sewage Right to Know in Connecticut. So if you sign up for notifications, you can find out exactly when any of these are discharging and avoid swimming in these areas. New York City also has its own notification system. By design, these only overflow when it rains. So these are creating poor water quality during and after rain. But if you have a location that has dry weather water quality conditions, it's probably something else.
And you can see the quick definition of what a CSO is. For those that don't know, Tracy, do you want to just give a quick...
Yeah, thank you, Martin. So combined sewer overflow systems are these old systems back when we were building our cities, and there was still, there weren't sewer lines, and there were still like horses, defecating on the roads. That when they wanted to clear out the waste from the cities, they would have what sewers that were in place, and also stormwater drainage where they had the animal waste all go together into one pipe. So what we've done now is we've gotten more modern, and every one of these big cities is fully sewered. Some of these old pipes are still in place. So in these areas where the combined sewer outfalls exist, if you get a certain amount of rainwater, like so basically the sewage is in the line, and the line has a certain capacity, usually 50% or less is being used for everyday sewage conveyance to the plant for treatment. Then if it rains and the rainwater is big enough to use up the remaining 50% plus 10%, that 10% tips over, and you get untreated sewage and wastewater from our homes and businesses and rain that goes directly into the Sound and other waterways in other cities, including the Hudson River. It goes directly out of these pipes right into the water untreated. If you have a rain event that is 50% above the capacity of those combined stormwater and sewage lines, then you get 50% of that extra capacity goes right out of those pipes, right into the Sound. And each of these dots is one of those outfalls. So if you happen to swim, at one of the private beach clubs over here, you can know exactly how close you are to the outfalls and try to not be in the water. And let me look at 2019. So you can see we didn't have data from these beaches last year, but you can see they don't do very well because they're so frequently impacted by these outfalls. So I would say the general rule of thumb, if you're around a city with combined sewer overflows, is wait at least 24 hours after any rain event before you go back to the beach. And probably your beaches are closed for 24 hours or sometimes 48 hours.
And one other point that I would add to that too, Tracy, is that if a beach is contained by an inlet, it doesn't flush as well as, say, a beach that is more towards the open water. Mamaroneck Harbor is a good example of that, where the beach is right contained inside of a harbor, and so because there's not as much flushing from the Sound as a whole, those contaminants sort of get stuck in those areas as well.
Yeah. So just to show you another feature of the tool, because I see we're already at Almost 12:45. So you can click on any of these. You can change the years to see the grades over time. But when you go into a beach like this one, which is an example of one that really is tucked way into a harbor, so they do have a lot of challenges with water quality, you can see how many of the samples are failing in dry weather versus wet weather. You can change the years and the grades right here on the page. And you can also look at the raw data going all the way back in time to 2003. I also want to show you just real quickly, and then we'll take some more questions, just so people have a sense of private beaches versus public beaches. So we added a beach access link, and I think it's really interesting to see where the public beaches on the Sound are, where all the private beaches on the Sound are, which is New York, because Connecticut had some legal actions that challenged private and public with restrictive passes. So they have a lot less private beaches. And also beaches that are quote unquote public, but they're really just for local residents. So these are the places where we'd like to see them open up, because when you look at what's fully public and you look at our population center, there's not a lot of beaches down here near New York City, Stamford. It doesn't start to really pick up until Norwalk. And one other thing I'll show you just real quickly. Let's look at Orchard Beach, our one New York City beach on the Sound. We also provide information on the amenities. So if you want to plan going to a new beach, you see an A+ beach and say, hey, I want to check that out. You can look at what's available at each of the beaches here. You can click out to the Department of Health site. Some of them are posting their data weekly in the summer season. So you could get whatever the most recent available data there is. You can get it by clicking there. And then if you want to do stuff to help your beach, for each of the beaches, we've assigned challenges. So this is our best understanding of what the source is of pollution. And that takes you into our Take Action section. And we talk about those pollution sources, and we give people a bunch of different options to actually get involved. So we're really hoping that with this website, people can learn more about their beach, and then people can start to take actions to clean up their beaches, because our goal is really for every beach on Long Island Sound to be an A beach. So with that, I'm going to go back to my last slide in the PowerPoint here. Sorry, not that one. And open it up again. Yeah, that's it. So, so with that, I'll open up for more questions, and I'm happy to go back to that Sound Health Explorer site if people want to look at specific areas.
So I'm not seeing any more in the chat. If anybody has a question, please submit it.
So I'm going to take us back to the site then while people think if they have other questions. And we'll just look at this again. So it's zooming in for me because it knows where I live. Once you start using the site, you can, actually, I'll show you the home page, the landing page. It knows I'm in Mamaroneck, so it gives me every time I log in the grades at my closest beach, the overall water quality health at my closest, bay or harbor. That's the data we have in Fishable. And then it gives me sea level rise projections for my neck of the woods as well. So our reports are available here. And if you go in here, you get all the beach data. If you go in here, you get ecological health data, which we publish in another report card, the Long Island Sound report card. You can look at your coastal watershed. And we also added this past year for people who want to get in, who are boaters, we added boat launches and kayak launches and some information on those that people can drill into and look at. So really hoping to get more people out on the Sound, because we know if you know the Sound and you have a personal connection to it, you're more motivated to protect it. And in this case, in the lens today, that really does get down to water quality and rain and infrastructure and beach management issues.
We only have about 10 minutes left, so it might be the right time to wrap this up. So I want to thank everybody for participating. Know that we do a lot of work not only around beaches and water quality, but we also do ecological restoration work, work for the climate. We do a lot of legal work around the communities in Connecticut and New York as well. And if you enjoy what we do, we encourage you to take a gander over to our website, savethesound.org. And if you feel so inclined, join one of our activist membership lists and give us a donation if you feel like supporting our efforts. So thanks, everyone. And we'll hopefully see you at the next one.